Hey everyone, I'm Nikki Miller with Lever by Movoto, and I'm so excited to bring you this class today. This is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. Today we're talking about maximizing your database. And let me give you a little background as to why I wrote this class, why it's so important, why I'm hoping that you'll stay with me until the end. My experience with most agents is that we actually work a lot harder than we need to. And the today's word that a lot of agents will use is that they're suffering from this thing that we call burnout. My bet is that you've probably heard of it before. And so many agents will say, gosh, I'm feeling burned out. I've been in hustle mode and I'm feeling burned out. And a lot of them attribute this burnout to this feeling of sort of overworking. And yet I would offer that when you got into real estate, you probably knew pretty quickly what you had signed up for. I don't think that you're afraid of the hard work. I actually think you signed up for this. I think that you love this business so much that you're willing to work really hard in order to make the dream that you had of getting into real estate in the first place come to fruition. My bet is that the reason that you're feeling burned out isn't because of the work that you're doing, but because you keep solving the same problem over and over and over and over and over again. And a lot of times this can show up in how we interact with our systems and how we solve some of the challenges that we might be facing operationally. But I think the biggest thing that burns agents out is that they're always stuck in the top of the funnel hustle. In other words, they're always trying to find the business that they can get within the next 30, 60, or 90 days. And what a lot of agents don't realize that not only is this the hardest business to convert, it's also the most expensive to get. Think how much you pay for something like a hot lead from a company versus a lead that comes from a referral partner, or a lead that comes from a friend who knows you, likes you, and trusts you, wants you to work with somebody else that they know. The cost is so different, and it's also the ease in which you're able to convert those leads. And so many agents are stuck in the hustle and they're getting burned out because they're so focused on this top of the funnel. They're so focused on the business that they might be able to find the next 30, 60, or 90 days. And they never build a systematic way in order to keep them in front of people at scale that not only makes selling real estate easier, filling their pipeline easier, but also makes this business a lot more enjoyable and allows you to get compound interest from all the work that you've done over the years. So most agents are starting from scratch basically every day because they're just focused on the business they can bring in right now. And today, what we're talking about is not only how to double down on all the work that you've already done, but how to make your lead generation easier. And that's the way that you do that is by working through your database, maximizing your database so that you can do more deals with less work. I'm not telling you to work harder. I'm actually telling you to be more efficient with the work that you're doing so that you can get more transactions with all the things that you've already been doing in your business. So I'm going to get through the official notices I have to get through, but let's talk through maximizing your database. Let's start with what agents get wrong about the database. First and foremost, so many agents think that there's a best database. One of the top questions that I get asked as someone who manages hundreds of agents' databases in Lever, one of the top questions I get asked is, Nikki, what's the best database to use? What's the best technology? Which is the best database I could buy? Which add-ons should I put to the database? And the fact of the matter is, there isn't a best database. It's the database that you use. The one that you will use consistently and constantly is the best database for you to use. So by the way, I don't care if that's technology that you work through. I don't care if that's your email. I don't care if that's your phone. I don't care if it's a spreadsheet, so long as you find a system that works for you. Once you've established that, once you've established a baseline, then we can have a conversation about technology that might make it more efficient or that might allow you to get a little bit more sophisticated in your database work. But until you've established which one you're going to use, the best one doesn't matter. The best one is the one that you're going to use consistently. And a lot of agents also think in the database as they start to broach this idea that they need to work on their database and they need to get it consistent. And by the way, I very rarely have to sell people on this. I bet every single one of you watching this webinar understands how important your database is. It's one of those things that you might be asking yourself, I know it's important, so why am I not doing it? Well, it's all the things that I'm covering right now. So many agents get in their head about the best database, or they get in their head about the perfect communication plan that they have to have. What's the best touch to send? What's the perfect way to do this? What's the best communication I could get for a return? Effort sets your floor, strategy sets your ceiling. Until you have started communicating, you can't hope to come up with a better strategy in order to communicate. So you first need to make sure that you are doing the communication, and then you can start to sharpen what works and what doesn't work. And by the way, the best way for you to do that is going to be to do some A/B testing, to start sending out some communication and see what works better than other things. There is no perfect communication plan. It's what works for you and for your business and what people are responding to after you test it out. Another challenge that most agents have in the database is that even if they are sending things out, they're not consistent. They're not in front of the database as consistently as they need to be in order to get transactions out of it. So in order for the database to work for you, in a lot of the ways that I'm going to outline today, you have to be consistent in front of it. Much like you have to be consistent in your top of the funnel lead generation, you also have to be consistent in order to stay in front of people. The way I explain this to people is, think about the last big vacation that you planned. Now, did you start planning that vacation? I'm talking about bigger vacation, somewhere where you had to fly somewhere and you spent money on a hotel and you knew you were going to be there for a few days or maybe a few weeks, and it was going to be a big ticket item. Did you start planning that vacation a week before you went on it? Absolutely not. You probably started planning it 6 months, if not more, in advance. And yet we think that we're going to talk to people once at the top of the funnel. They're going to reach out to us about buying or selling real estate. And if they don't convert in the next 30, 60, or 90 days with the biggest transaction of their life, that it's a bad lead or it's somebody that we should just put in the database and forget about. No, people start this type of planning months, if not years in advance. And so what that means for you is that if we know on average 73% of leads will convert 3 or more years after you get introduced to them, then that means that you have to consistently be in front of them over time in order for them to think of you when they think of real estate. So you have to be consistent in that follow-up, because the fact of the matter is you never know when you need to be top of mind, so you need to always be top of mind. A lot of agents also don't know their database map. They don't know how often they need to be in front of people. They don't know how many people they need to have in their database in order to get the number of transactions that they are attempting to get. And so therefore, you need to understand your database map so you can build the right database in order for you to get to the number that you want to get to from a conversion standpoint. In other words, you need to have 1,000 people in your database to get to the number of transactions you want to get to, or do you need to have 10,000 people in your database to get to the number of transactions that you want to get to? And by the way, once you know that, how are you going to get to that number? And how are you going to systematically grow the database? Which brings me to the next thing that most agents don't think about, which is the system they're going to use not only to grow the database, but also to systematically communicate with the database. Goals are for people who want to win once. Systems are for agents who insist on winning over and over and over and over again. So if you send one great touch out to your database, while you may start some conversations, while you may get some opportunities from that, it's not going to help you consistently win. You have to be consistent and have a system in order for you to systematically follow up with that database over time, in order for you to win through the database over and over and over again. And then last but not least, most agents just never start. They spend so much time pontificating about the perfect way or the perfect database or the perfect plan, and they never actually begin. Again, effort sets your floor, strategy sets your ceiling. So hopefully after today, you'll have a better strategy, but I assure you, if you never start, then you could have the best strategy in the world and it won't matter. You have to start following up with the database. You have to begin using this system in order for it to start working for you. Now you might be saying to yourself, well done, Nikki. It's that obvious. I know I won't get any results if I don't do it. To which my question would be, well, then why don't you? Why don't you begin? Begin today. Let us make each other a promise today. Let us both promise that if you're going to sit through the rest of this webinar, if you're going to listen to the rest of what we talk about today, let's just make each other a promise that you're going to do something with it. You're going to take something out of this webinar. You're going to take something out of this class today, and you are going to do something with it as it pertains to your database. Don't try to implement everything that we talk about, but pick one thing. Make that promise right now. Just say, I'm going to do one thing from this webinar that's going to move my database forward so that I can begin getting systematic business out of my database. All right, so let's talk about turning your database into a money-making machine. This class is going to show you how to turn your database into a very simplistic but money-making machine by using your consistent actions and strategies. Again, That won't happen unless you actually do it. So you have to do your part. And yet, if you follow these principles, it's not if you will get business out of your database, it's when. This is designed to make your business and lead generation easier. So we could have a whole class on the best way to lead generate. And that's the top of the funnel. That's how you're bringing business in the next 30, 60, or 90 days and how you convert it. But this class is about how you systematically grow your pipeline over time with less effort by using your database in order to help you do that. This also isn't about getting leads. It's about leveraging the business that you've already had by leveraging the communication, the contacts that you already have. Let me give you a great example. The way that I built my real estate business was door knocking. When I started in real estate, I was really young. I was in a very high price point area. I had just moved there, so I didn't know anybody. And frankly, I'm not that great on the phone. I knew I didn't want to cold call. I didn't have a sphere of influence. And I knew how important this subject was, how important it was going to be in order for me to get my name out there and grow my database. So I started door knocking. That was how I grew my business. And one of my favorite stories about the database is I remember there was somebody in the neighborhood that I door knocked that I met on my very first day. And I put them in my database as we do at the beginning. Remember on day one in your real estate business when you added everybody to the database because you only had like 10 people in there? And so your goal was to get everyone in there possible. You wanted to grow it as quickly as possible. I'm going to challenge you should treat every day as if it was day one in your real estate business. Everybody should be going into the database, but we'll talk about that later. But anyway, so I added this one person to my database who I had met. It was literally the first door that I knocked on my first day in real estate. And we had a great conversation. I ended up getting their contact information and I added them to my database. And I continued to talk to them year over year over year over year over year over year over year because I had a database system that continuously kept me in front of that person over time. Well, that contact that I met in 2014, door knocking, ended up being one of the highest price point transactions that I did in 2024. 10 years later. And because I had stayed in front of this person all that time, they not only used me to sell that house, they used our team to sell another house and use us to buy 2 other investment properties from the proceeds from that house. So it's the importance of staying in front of these people over time. Now, most people would have met that person on that first day and said, well, they're not ready to go right now, therefore it's a bad lead. Or I'm not worried about them because they don't want to buy this year or even next. But I got business from that one day of door knocking 10 years later without having to do anything else other than set up the right database system. So if you can do that, then all the work that you are doing today is not only going to reap you benefits today for the business that you get today or this month or this year, but also for the rest of your career if you do it right, if you manage the database appropriately. So let's get into the actual steps in order for you to do this. Step 1, you have to audit and organize your database. And I'm going to challenge for all of you that you don't get ready to get ready to get ready to get ready here. A lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm just going to pick a day. I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to finally do my database. The stars will align. The temperature will be perfect. I will have a day of nothing. And that's the day I'm going to do my database. No, you won't. Just make time for it today. Make a little bit of time for it every day if you have to, but make time today. If you keep waiting for the conditions to be perfect or the perfect time, it's not going to happen. So make time to do it today. And first, you're going to audit and organize your database based off who's in there. So you have to make a couple simplistic decisions about who you're talking to on a regular basis. So I'll give you the ones that I recommend because a lot of agents end up making this far more complex than it needs to be. They'll talk about where they met them, or they'll talk about whether the person has kids or pets or all these different tags that they'll put people into. That can work if you're very organized in your database. But my recommendation is that you label these people based off how you want to communicate with them. So to me, there are only a couple of buckets that you're going to need. You have your sphere of influence or your Mets. And I'm going to tell you that this is pretty much anybody that you've met. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone who's actually in your sphere of influence, right? So this is anybody that you've met who's not ready to go right now, right? As we talk about the database, I want you to hear that specifically what we're focused on today are people who are not ready in the next 30, 60, or 90 days. So these are more long-term type communications. I'm purposefully excluding today all the people who you would put in our organization, what we call a hot list, somebody who you would put on a hot list who's ready to go sooner. This is really about long-term communication and how you're going to grow your database over time. Okay, so just know that today I'm purposefully neglecting anybody who's who you're going to convert in the immediate future, right? So this is people who are 90 days or more likely 6 months or more beyond. Okay, so I'm going to put them into a couple different buckets. I'm going to put sphere of influence, or in my own database, I call these my METs, people that I've met before, i.e. I could say we met in the past or when we met in the past. And by the way, that could be varying degrees of how you met them. Maybe it's from an event or from a networking party or from a kid's soccer game or from an open house. It could be from a lot of different places, right? So that's going to be my MET group. And then I'm going to have my group of past clients. They're probably going to get a specific set of communication. And then in my world, where we deal with quite a bit of lead generation through Movoto and Ojo, I'm going to have cold leads, i.e. people that I got in through, you could have it through your website or maybe through social media, but I actually haven't gotten to connect with them. They go into a cold lead bucket. Referrals are usually, in my world, going to be referring agents. Right? These are agents that refer me business. Vendors are people that I do business with. Now, this is just some broad categories, and they're intended to be broad. I want you to hear that. If you get too narrow and too specific, it's just going to make this too complex for you. So I'd actually recommend that you keep your buckets as generic as possible. I'll explain why as we get into more of these steps. So I'm going to suggest you keep them as generic as possible. But if your lead generation looks different, I would suggest that you do categorize based off your lead generation. So for example, I've had lead generation. Like I said, I built my whole business door knocking. So I've got a category that's called door knocking. And then I know that I met this person door knocking, and I'm also typically going to have an address for them. If you're somebody who does open houses, I would suggest that you add open houses, right? So you're going to have different categories based off how you lead generate. And then you're going to segment those contacts into categories. These are hot, i.e. I'm not going to put them on long-term communication. Those are the ones that you need to be communicating with immediately. These are nurture, i.e. anyone who falls in this type of contact or in this category is going to be on a long-term nurture plan. These are sphere, which goes into this type of nurture plan, and these are past clients, which goes into this type of nurture plan. Don't worry if you don't understand what I'm talking about yet. I'll help you put all the pieces together. And then the last is remove those without contact information. There is no reason for you to have somebody in your database that you can't get a hold of. So if it's just a name and you don't have a phone number or an email, then get rid of them. I would also suggest if you're not doing mailers or letters and all you have is a name and an address, you should probably get rid of those as well. So you want to make your database a meaning machine. And what I mean by that is that you want your database to be able to give you meaning, give you conversation, add to your pipeline. So if you have somebody in there who's just taking up space who you can't communicate with, you have two choices in my world. You either figure out how to fill out their contact information, which we do work on with our agents. That's one of the first touches that we send out when we're managing an agent's database. One of the very first things that we send out is going to be a touch that allows them to complete contact information. So this is designed to help them complete the contact information. For example, if somebody only has a phone number, we've got a great touch that we send out that helps to get their email. If they just have an email, we've got a great touch that we send out that helps to get their phone number and their address. So you've got two choices, either get rid of them or complete their contact information, okay? I would suggest completing their contact information if you can. You want to beef up your database as much as possible, but it's one or the other. That's step number one. Now, step number two, after you've audited and organized your database and decided which types of contacts you have and how you're going to segment them into categories, i.e. these are the people who I don't put on nurture plans because they're my next 30, 60, or 90-day business and I need to stay in front of them myself. I don't want them to be on automation. Or these are people who are on long-term automation, or these are people who are vendors. Well, then you're going to define your rules. Now, I recommend that on pretty much anything in your business, you have to have what I call the rules, right? These are the rules by which we all choose to follow. Now, for a lot of you listening to this, you're probably an individual agent. You might be saying to yourself, well, it's just me, Nikki. I know the rules. No, you don't. Let me assure you that on one day, you probably had one set of rules that you were following. And then on another day, you went to a class or you heard something, you said, well, that's a good idea. I'm going to implement that. And before you know it, your database is a hot mess and you don't know what anything means. So you need to define your rules and then never stray from those rules unless you decide to do a full database change. And this will allow you to be consistent in how you manage your database moving forward. I want you to think about it this way. I always call this the hit by the bus rules. So I want you to imagine that your rules should be so clear and so concise that if you left your business today, if you got hit by a bus and left your business today, I would be able to come in and I would know exactly what system to follow in your database and what everything means. Now, here's how we start. Remember, we identified who we have in the database and which category they go into. So let's use, for example, the MET category. And we decided that anybody who's in the MET category gets long-term nurture. That's who gets what communication, i.e., I know anybody who is in a MET category gets long-term communication. That also means that maybe I have somebody who I qualify as a hot lead, and they're not going to get any long-term communication. I'm fully dependent upon myself to be communicating with them and converting them until I move them into the long-term communication or MET bucket. Does that make sense? I know vendors get this type of communication. Referral agents get this type of communication, right? So when I say who gets what communication, it's what type. And then we're going to move to how often. Do I talk to this person weekly? Do I talk to them monthly? Do I talk to them every quarter? What does that communication look like? And then it's by what avenue or avenues, right? If it's long-term communication, I would highly suggest that you break up how you communicate with them. So I'll get to more details on this later, but think about, am I going to call them? Am I going to text them? Am I going to email them? Am I going to send them a mailer? Is it a social touch? What does that look like? Okay. And then who's going to do it? By the way, if you're an individual agent, you're like, well, duh, I'm going to do it. That might be true, but sometimes you can leverage vendors or partners in order to help you, or you can leverage an automated system. So for example, if you're using a database that has the ability to send out automated communication, well, sure, you might be the one doing it in the sense that you're setting it up, but really it's your database that's going to do it. You're going to schedule an email to go out on this day or at this cadence or whatever that looks like, and your database is going to be the one to do that touch. So if you're an individual agent looking at this, then it's going to be, okay, is this a touch I have to make, or is this a touch that I can automate? And if you're a team, then is this a touch that my database is going to automate? Is this a touch that a team member is going to do? Or is this something that I am going to do, right? And then how is it going to be updated? So if you are doing your part and you are communicating back to people, you're actually having conversation when they communicate with you, or you're doing your calls, well, I presume that you're probably going to have some updates that you have to make. I've called this person, they never answer. I sent them a text on this day. I did a touch on this day. I happened to run into them at the supermarket this day, whatever that looks like. How are you going to update that? How often? When are you going to do it? We'll get into more rules, so to speak, there in a couple of minutes. Step 3 is you're going to create your follow-up system that works. And by the way, you probably have already started panicking. You're like, but Nikki, I don't know how it works. I haven't started using my database at a high level. Breathe. I'm going to give you some examples. And then you're going to build your own. And you're going to find out what works best for your database. But let me help you cheat, and I'll give you some of our playbook. So first and foremost, the SOI conversion plan that we use. Now, I want you to think about this as, for example, this could be SOI, i.e. someone you know really well, if you've got a lot of those, if you've been integral in your community. This also could just be somebody that you've met, right? Again, I sort of interchange what I call the SOI category as well as the MET category. The reason I think about it this way, and by the way, there's a lot of people who have differentiating opinions on the database, and we all think we're right. Otherwise, we would be fools to be doing it any differently. But I support hundreds of individual agents databases nationwide, and I know that this works because most people want to feel like they know you. Most people want to feel like they're in your sphere of influence. We just treat everybody that way. So for example, in this sphere of influence category, we've got 38 touches per year. Now, that's kind of the magic number, right? That's the magic number that we need in order to increase the likelihood of conversion. That's the math for how many touches we've seen that an agent needs to be putting out to their database in order for them to get ideal conversion from it, which is usually between 3 to 6%. So the way that we organize those touches could be 12 monthly newsletters, right? In other words, you're just sending a monthly newsletter every month, 4 quarterly check-in calls. So a lot of people think when they think about keeping in front of their database, they think, oh, it's all up to me. I've got to make all of these touches, and it's impossible to do that as your database gets bigger. So you have to automate some of this. You're going to need to automate the number of touches that you put out. So a monthly newsletter is something that can be very valuable if you do it right. Please don't send them recipes. Please don't send them garbage they're not going to use. Send them something that's useful. Here's what's happening in your neighborhood. Here's what's happening in the market. Here's what's happening in the economy, whatever it might be. By the way, This can be something that's highly specialized to you as well. I always give the example of in our ecosystem, we've got one of our top agents, also DJs on the side. So much fun. And so she sends on a weekly basis a little newsletter that has not only information about what's happening in the market, but all the best shows of local DJs to go to. So this can be anything that feels authentic to you. Decide what it is and then commit to sending that out on a regular cadence. But for example, in your Met category, it could look like 12 monthly newsletters, 4 quarterly check-in calls. Yes, that's you that needs to do that. A lot of people try to pass this off, and this is the most important thing you could be doing in your business. Do not pass off something like your quarterly check-in calls. Don't try to give it to a VA. Don't try to give it to an ISA. Don't try to give it to anybody else. This is your job as a real estate agent. If you don't do this, then how can they build a relationship with you? The whole point of having our touches at this cadence and the whole point of being in front of our database is so that our people build a relationship with us and they think of us when they think of real estate. If you have someone else doing all of these touches, how are they going to think of you when they think of real estate, right? We send out 6 holiday campaigns. We always design all of our campaigns for response. So even if it's a holiday campaign, it's usually designed in the form of a question. What are you going to be doing for this holiday season, etc., things like that. I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. And then we have 16 email or text touches. So these are things that are automated from the database that automatically go out this many times per year. So typically it's going to be 1 every 3 weeks or so. And then we have a hot lead conversion plan. So this is what I meant by, we're talking about the database today, but I wanted to explain the difference between the two. So something like a hot lead conversion plan, this actually doesn't go into the database. This is what I am doing immediately after getting a lead. And I call this our 3-3-3 plan. So here's what it looks like. You have 3 touches on the first day. Here's what that might look like. I got a live transfer in our ecosystem from Movoto or Ojo. I got a live transfer. I talk to the person. That's touch number 1. I'm getting an understanding of what it is that they want and which home they want to see, etc. So then I'm going to say, okay, great. I'm going to schedule the appointment, and I'll usually suggest, hey, there's probably a couple other houses that we could look at while we're out. I'd love to send those over to you. I'm also going to make sure that our appointment time works for us to see 123 Main Street. I'll follow up with you after this so you have my phone number. That's touch number 2, right? So immediately after the phone call, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to say, great chatting with you, so-and-so. Here's my phone number so you have it. I'm going to check on these couple other properties and the one that we're planning to look at to see if that appointment works. I'll send it to you by the end of the day. And then by the end of the day, you have touch number 3, which is, I'm still waiting to hear back from them, or here's the other properties I'm thinking of, or yes, we're good to go, whatever that is. So 3 touches on the first day. And then 3 touches within the first week of introduction. Hopefully that's you scheduling an appointment and then a follow-up after that. But if it's not, then you want to continuously stay in front of them for those first 3 touches. This is not automated. It is not going in your database. You are doing this. And then our other 3 rules, if you actually have a hot lead, i.e. somebody who's ready to go in the next 30, 60, or 90 days, you should never go more than 3 days without touching them in some form or another, right? And by the way, when I say touch, I mean like communication, right? So you should never go more than 3 days without having some type of communication with this person. Call, text, email, follow-up, check-in, whatever that looks like. And then let's get to another different type of database touch plan, which is maybe our referral agent conversion plan. So we don't need to communicate with our referral agents as often as we need to communicate with our METs or our sphere of influence. So they only need to get 16 touches per year. And here's what that might look like. I'm going to send them, as opposed to sending them a newsletter every month, I'm going to send them 6 newsletters. So 1 every other month. I'm going to send them, on the months that I don't send a newsletter, a real estate education or interesting facts email. Here's something I learned this month. Here's a class that I went to. Here's an event that I went to that I really enjoyed. Here's something that I learned in my business this month. Here's a best practice I've been doing that works for me. It's intended to just provide value. And then 4 quarterly, you got it, you guessed it, 4 quarterly check-in calls. How are things going with you? Here's what's happening in our market. How can I help? Do you have anybody who I should be talking to? Anyone who's thinking about moving this direction, etc. Right? So you have to identify. First, we talked about we're going to clean up the database and label everybody. And then based off how we've labeled them, we're going to make a decision about how often we communicate with that person, or group of people, what communication is going out. And then we actually decide what our follow-up system is going to be. So what is going out and when, how often, and what the communication is going to actually look like. And then we get to step number 4, which is add value, get business. You have to add value. A lot of people get very stuck in, what do I do? What should I say? How do I say it? And I just say, add value. You know how to add value to a consumer as a real estate agent. You do. If you don't know, ask ChatGPT and it will give you some options, right? But you have to add value in a way that creates communication and response, so that you usually get this by way of asking questions. I like to send out all those 16 touches that we send out via text or email, and that sphere of influence example I gave you are almost always question-based. Is this valuable for you? Can I help with this? Do you want more information on that? Would you like to learn about this, right? It's designed to create response, which keeps me in communication with the people who are in my database. So you want to add value in a way that creates communication response, and you want to add value in things that are actually valuable and they'll understand, right? So for example, if you send out a big touch that says, do you want a CMA on your house? The consumer has no idea what you're talking about. They don't know what a CMA is, right? So the better way to communicate that is, have you ever been curious about what the value of your home is, right? And if they respond to that, then you begin a conversation. The other thing you can do if you're unsure what to say to your database, ask. That's the beauty of being in conversation with your database. Just ask them, hey, client, do you want more local market updates? Would you like more home tips? Would you like lifestyle guides? What would be most beneficial for me to send to you? Trust me, they will respond. Tell stories of successes that you've had with other clients. So you can tell stories about how you won something for a client through your sense of urgency, or how you negotiated something that most agents aren't able to negotiate, or how you helped a client through a challenging time. Tell stories. Our clients love to hear that, and it helps them create the connection that if they want the same experience, they should work with you. And then invite them to events, webinars, home equity check-ins is what we call them, and give them an opportunity to say yes or to communicate with you and start another conversation. So again, it's, who am I talking to? What am I going to say? How often? How do I provide value? And how do I create conversation? So some general best practices for all of you. When you're working through your database, one of the worst things you can do is get into the office after you've mended all your emails, which is, by the way, somebody else's to-do list. So like after you've gone through somebody else's to-do list, and you finally get to like, okay, what am I going to do today? And you try to create your call list today or figure out who you're supposed to talk to today. Please don't do that. Set up a schedule for you to talk to people on a daily basis that you identify the night before. So the way that we suggest doing this is we suggest just picking a letter out of the alphabet and saying like, okay, today and tomorrow, depending upon how big your database is, I'm going to call all my A's. The next day I'm going to call my B's. So I just build that list ahead of time so that I know exactly who I'm going to be calling and talking to. And then I get myself on a quarterly cadence with that group of people. So you need to create your call list the night before so that you walk into the day knowing who you're going to reach out to. The most important part of your database touches is that at some point they actually get to hear directly from you. You will be floored how many great conversations you have the opportunity to have and how many conversions are easier because you've been communicating with them. So your database will tell you, here's what the last thing you said to them was, and then you come up with a great script and who you're going to call so that it makes it easier for you to actually get those calls out of the way. We also suggest scheduling a daily time that you're going to update notes and add people to your database. 30 minutes should be plenty for all of you, but just schedule the same time every single day. So for me, still to this day, I do it before the end of my day. I have a 30-minute block at the end of every day where I'm going to take any notes on anyone I talked to today, add anybody who I should be adding to my database, and ensure that that gets done on a daily basis. Because if I try to do it on a weekly basis, I'm going to forget people, or they're not going to get added, or whatever that looks like. So if you want to stay consistent, just pick the same time and time frame that you do it every single day. And then begin. Stop looking for the perfect cadence or the perfect communication plan or the perfect database. Just start reaching out to people. You will find the right path forward by implementing your imperfect plan. So you promised that you're going to use one tactic from today. So I hope that if you don't use any of these other suggestions or tactics, you'll use the one that I recommend most, which is begin. You have to start. In order for you to understand how to use your database at an even higher level, you've got to begin using your database. So start today. Design your touches for response by asking questions and offering help, and plan your month's touches in advance. If you know you need to get a newsletter out this month and it's the 28th or the 30th of the month and you still haven't gotten it out, it's unlikely that you're going to get to that deadline. So even if you aren't able to plan your whole year in advance, make sure that you are planning ahead as much as possible. And at minimum, you're getting at least your month's touches done in advance so that you don't have to worry about it, and then schedule a time that you'll plan for your next month. All right, guys, I hope that this was helpful. I hope this has given you a little bit of insight on how to use your database at a higher level. Remember, so many agents are working so much harder than they need to be. You have the ability to leverage your database to automatically add people to your pipeline over time. This is the work that you've already done that you can add to your pipeline and make it easier for you to systematically grow your business. This is how you get the compound effect in your real estate business, and how you can actually create a J curve with your real estate business, but an opposite curve with your work. You don't have to do as much work to get the same, if not more, results if you build the right systems. And I'll go back to how I started, which is effort sets your floor, strategy sets your ceiling. So begin and then work on your strategy as you get to know your database better and as you see what works and doesn't work. I hope this has been amazingly helpful. We love to hear from you. Shoot us a message on Instagram, Nikki Miller, Lever by Movoto. We want to hear how this works. I hope that this was helpful for you in your database, and happy real estate growing.